In order for you to really understand the Reserve project, I think it's helpful to understand a little bit of the backstory. So I'm going to try to walk you through that backstory without spending too much time on it. The people who started the project had spent about 6 years working together beforehand. I don't know exactly how many people, we're talking like not just like a couple of friends, we're talking about like maybe 10 to 15 people who were part of the project early on, had that 6 or so year history working together. They helped start what's called the effective altruism movement. And they were just one of many teams who were involved in the founding of the EA movement. I think you really have to understand a little bit about that to know where we came from. The effective altruism movement is a group of people who are really interested in figuring out like, okay, if we want to improve the world, which methods actually work to do that? Like you can look at many different charities, and some of them seem to mostly just be wasting money, whereas others seem to be, purchasing a lot of life improvement or world improvement per dollar. And so the effective altruism movement, one of the things it does is tries to evaluate which charities make sense to donate money to and which don't. That's kind of the simplest thing that EA does. But there's a whole other section of effective altruism that goes way beyond just normal charity and is thinking about like, well, the entire world is our oyster. We can do whatever we want. And so what should we do if we really want everything to be great in the world? What were the highest impact things we could possibly do with our entire lives? And the people that started Reserve were sort of part of that corner of the effective altruism movement, trying to do something very, very ambitious. It was a group of people who really just took this attitude of like, okay, let's understand, all of the problems, all the opportunities in the world that we're able to grasp, and try to figure out what could we do that would be the most meaningful, the most impactful. And so they thought about all sorts of things, ranging from artificial intelligence, the good things that could happen, the bad things could happen, human mental health, just like how can we all as people actually have a better experience and be mentally healthier, and how do we make society continue to function, to be more and more functional instead of less and less functional over the course of time. No problem was too big for us, for that group of people. And I tell you this story because I think it helps understand a little bit about the Reserve attitude, which is that we may be too ambitious. Like this is a group of people who, when they encounter some sort of challenge or some sort of difficulty, they're sort of always willing to up the ante. It's sort of like, okay, we didn't realize that we're going to have to deal with this, but all right, fine. I guess we have to become experts in this. We have to sort this out. And so, if anything, I think we tend to err on the side of biting off more than we can chew, rather than doing something that is meaningless but achievable. And so, I think that that's kind of baked into the DNA of the Reserve project. And I think you'll see that as you learn more about what it is we're trying to do, and how complicated it is, and how there are things that we don't know how to do them yet. We don't know if we can overcome all of the barriers. And that sort of comes from this attitude of like, well, we may as well try. It seems like it could work, and it seems like it'd be really good if it did work for a lot of people, so let's see if we can figure it out. Another thing about that early team that has kind of shaped the Reserve project is that we don't just care about stable currency. We don't just care about financial access. We actually care about many, many, many different problems in the world. I'm pretty vocal about caring about how things turn out with artificial intelligence, for example, but other team members have many other things that they care about, animal welfare, and how things go with environmental issues and all sorts of things. And so many of us want to make money because we want to fund other projects that we've thought about in the past and want to execute in the future that maybe other people wouldn't be willing to fund because they're weird or different or speculative. That's true for me personally. I want to make money from Reserve, in part because there's further things I want to do in the future, and I want to be able to pay for those things. And so the Reserve project it's kind of made from these people who, they really want to help people directly, and a lot of the Reserve project really is about helping people directly. They also want to get rich in order to be able to do other things in the future, sort of unlock other opportunities. And so the project sort of has the spirit of trying to do both of those things at once. So let's talk about historically, sort of how this came to be. In 2011, I was sort of thinking to myself like, wow, is Bitcoin going to be the new form of money? And so I went and bought some on Mt. Gox. sort of this complicated, sketchy system. You had to like, put your money into this other service, Dwala, in order to get it to Mt. Gox, and then you could buy your Bitcoins, and then you could, withdraw them and hold them on your laptop, so to speak. But by 2012, me and some friends, were hanging out and thinking about Bitcoin, and I concluded Bitcoin was not going to be the new form of money, basically because of its simplistic monetary policy. It just seemed to me like the more people adopted it, the more that would have to drive the price up, and you'd have, possibly volatility in that process. It just didn't seem like people would treat that like currency. And so, unfortunately for me, I sold all of my Bitcoin in 2012. But I had sort of gotten to the point of realizing Bitcoin wasn't going to work as the new form of money, at least in a transactional sense, and I still believe that today. Some people say that Bitcoin will become stable enough and will work as a form of money. Maybe that's possible. We did use gold for a while, but I really think that there's a better way, and this series of videos will probably describe what that is. In 2013, I was sort of thinking about, well, is it a good idea to basically enter the domain of cryptocurrency and try to somehow make money and improve capitalism, sort of improve the system of capitalism in some way, because capitalism, I think, is really amazing, really powerful, does all sorts of good things, also has a bunch of negative side effects. So it's like, well, maybe there's some way to use cryptocurrency to improve capitalism and make money while doing so. But the conclusion was like, too busy. There's these other things I'm trying to do. So you decided not to do that. So, the years go by, we get to 2017, and it was sort of like, whoa, crazy crypto bubble. What's going on? Let's go check in on cryptocurrency. Wow, smart contracts. That's crazy. What's going to happen with all this? And, honestly, I started studying crypto at that time, not planning to go into the field, just trying to understand how bubbles work. Like, I had always been curious about what happened with the tech bubble. And it was sort of like, this is kind of another tech bubble. Maybe I can just go interact with the people and understand what's going on. But, I started to think like, well, wait a minute. Maybe that idea of trying to change capitalism with crypto and make money along the way, like maybe that is a good idea. Maybe I should think more about that. And so it led me to thinking more deeply about, could we create a cryptocurrency that really would work as money? That would, the idea was like, could we have a stable currency that outlasts fiat currencies, which end up devaluing? It was an attractive enough idea. It seemed like it could work. It seemed like it could be a really big, a sort of important thing for the world. And so me and some friends, who I referred to before, we literally ended up getting together and making a list on a whiteboard of all the problems you would have to fix with Bitcoin in order for it to work as money. And this was sort of driven by kind of this very big idea of, could you create a cryptocurrency that would outlast fiat currencies and perform better than them in the very long term? And so, but as we started to think concretely about this project, we started thinking about this sort of like, classic Silicon Valley question of like, well, what's the go-to-market strategy? How do you start this off? How do you get it going? And we realized that cryptocurrency really is kind of digital cash. You can send it peer-to-peer from one person to the other with no intermediary, and that's pretty interesting. And so we thought about, well, where is cash used? And where would digital cash be interesting? And some people pushed us to focus on industries that were kind of marginalized. For example, the cannabis industry. People pointed out, well, there's all these cannabis companies that can't do payments in the normal banking system. Maybe you should focus on cannabis as your go-to-market strategy. We decided no, because it's sort of questionably legal. And we just didn't want to get involved with something that was questionably legal, especially early on in the project. That didn't feel like the right way to start off what we were trying to do. Another option that was sort of, the thing that everyone was focused on in 2017 and mostly still is crypto speculation, right? Like we could create a stable cryptocurrency and try to compete in speculators using it in the entire crypto speculation industry. But again, we just weren't very interested in that idea. It just seemed like, if we spent years doing that and people ended up using it just for speculation and we didn't end up like going further than that, that just seemed like, I don't know, just not something we really wanted to spend our time on. It seemed like the world was going to figure out crypto speculation infrastructure whether we did anything or not, and it didn't feel like a particularly meaningful thing to contribute to. Yes, maybe we could make money, and that is, again, part of our motivation, but it wasn't the entire motivation. It didn't feel like something that would actually capture our interest for the long term. The thing that we ended up focusing on, and we had this thought like very, very early. We're talking about like a few weeks of thinking here. We started thinking about bringing U.S. dollars, U.S. dollar cryptocurrencies, to situations where people are encountering hyperinflation, where countries are undergoing hyperinflation. And when we started to think about that, it was like, yeah, we don't know if we could do that. Like, we didn't understand if we could do that yet. But it's like, if we could do that, that would be actually useful. We would really be offering something to people that that would be meaningful in their lives, and could really change, the way of life for people who are encountering the problem of hyperinflation. And so, this is obviously just a brief summary, but that kind of led to the overall reserve plan. The overall reserve plan was then established. It was like, okay, we'll build RPay, an application to make it possible to access U.S. dollar cryptocurrencies, especially in countries with higher hyperinflation. So it was with that early thinking that we established the basic reserve plan, which contains these two parts, RPay and the reserve protocol. So as a result of this initial team, this background for the project, I think that hopefully will help you understand why reserve is different in certain kinds of ways from many other cryptocurrency projects. One is, I think the project and the people are perhaps a little bit unreasonably ambitious at times. I think the thing that we're doing is actually meaningful, which in comparison to many crypto projects is different. I think generally we're pretty low bullshit people, because you just can't do things like this if you're willing to kind of accept bullshit. But we're still money oriented, right? Like some projects might be completely ideological and have no interest in making money, but we do have that interest. And I hope I've explained to you a bit about the core of why. Obviously, people also individually want money. Everybody wants, to have financial freedom, and obviously we're motivated by that as well. But I think that there's this other key piece to the DNA that sort of relates to how we think about money and making money. The next part of the story that really kind of defined the early conditions for the project was me finding Gabo. In 2019, we launched the early version of our app, and honestly, it was terrible. It was really crappy. And we knew that. And we basically followed the principle of like, well, ship it anyway, ship it early. And if you really have built something that there's huge demand for, at least a few people will be willing to use your really crappy app. And they did. We got early traction with that very crappy app. But that crappy app ended up being really relevant for a particular purpose that I didn't even really think about in advance. So what happened was I was put on a panel at San Francisco Blockchain Week in 2019, just at like a side event, not even the main event, that was talking about Venezuela and crypto usage in Venezuela. And so was this other person, Gabo. And right before the panel, Gabo got up on stage and spent 15 minutes describing the Petro, which was the state-backed cryptocurrency project that he had a bit of a hand in. He had a substantial hand in. Where, Gabo essentially had tried to solve the currency problems in Venezuela through, working with the government to issue a state-backed cryptocurrency, which is kind of a crazy thing to do. The project didn't quite go the way that he had anticipated, but it was very fascinating to hear that story. And Gabo had a lot of skeptics at the time, because if you collaborate with the Venezuelan government, some people view it in such a light where they become skeptical of you, especially many people in Venezuela itself. And so I remember at the time, some of the people in the audience were very skeptical of Gabo. They thought that he was a liar, that he was some sort of scammer. And I didn't know. I wondered. I was like, well, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But I figured if this guy is for real, he really should be a part of the Reserve project, because you can tell that there's something inside of him where he's trying to do something that's actually deeply aligned with what we're trying to do. So I decided just to not let him out of my sight. I took him to dinner, and we talked a bunch. And I think even at that dinner, I said, I think you should maybe just join our project. And I convinced him to move in with me. So at the time, he was living at like a family friend's home. He didn't have any money or any plan or any job. I convinced him to get on a plane and move to the Bay Area and just live in my apartment. And so for some time, he just co-worked in our office while I studied him. I did a bunch of reference checking, and I just watched him, all day, every day, at the office, at home, and tried to figure out, is this guy for real, or is he a scammer the way that some people think? And over the course of a few months, I became comfortable with him. I became convinced that no, there's a political misinterpretation going on here. I think it really does make sense to place trust in this person and to work with him. And so Gabo began working on the project with us, but at first we couldn't announce that. We couldn't announce that because it was too politically divisive in Venezuela. And so it was really funny, because for many, many months, many people in the Reserve community would constantly reach out and send me news articles and so on about Gabo, saying hey, this person seems really relevant, maybe you should talk to them. And we weren't able to say oh yeah, he's actually already part of the team. Eventually, we became comfortable, and we decided to go ahead and publicly announce Gabo's involvement. And I guess I haven't really told you anything about Gabo, but I hope that it illustrates his passion, given that he was willing to go and work with the Venezuelan government and try to create a state-backed cryptocurrency in order to solve the financial problems in Venezuela. That's a very bold thing to do. If you know anything about the Venezuelan situation or Venezuelan politics, it's a very bold thing to do. And Gabo has really it really opened up the door to building out our entire team in Latin America. And so, so much of what we've achieved has been because of the fantastic team that we've been able to build out, not just in the US, but in Latin America. And our team at this point expands, sort of beyond just the US and Latin America, but it was really bringing Gabo on that opened up that door in a new way to us. And so that really marked an important turning point for the project. There's one side note I want to add here, which is that there's so many critical contributions along the way. It's really easy to mention top executives or founders, and those people I think sometimes get too much credit. Many people know of me, now many people know of Gabo, but there's many pieces that have come from others on the team, and it's hard to pick out and name any of them, because it feels unfair, because there's so many, and it'd be hard to go in and mention all of them exhaustively. But I just want to point out that the credit for everything we've done needs to go to the entire team of over 200 people now. And there's actually even a lot of effort that happens outside of the core team of Reserve in the different communities that are part of the project. So, I mentioned Gabo and I mentioned this story to help you understand kind of how things initially came together, but not to say that, it's all him, and obviously it's not all me. There's really so much effort and so many ideas and so many insights from so many people that have made this possible.